So I've gotten this question a lot lately. What should someone expect when they're first going to therapy? Um, for me, I kind of had an interesting entry into therapy. I actually ended up in the emergency room with a couple of friends of mine because I was really suicidal and I'm like, dude, I can't do this kind of thing. And basically, that I actually got a really good PA in the psych portion of the ER, which is not a great place to be, honestly. So if you can avoid that, try to avoid that at all costs, unless you really need to be there. What was I gonna say? Oh, anyways, so I it ended up being that the guy actually had been through some of the things I'd been through, um, and so he talked to me about a lot of it, and he's like, I don't tell everyone this, but I think it'll help you, kind of thing. This is what I've been through, and these are some things that will probably help, kind of thing. And they gave me basically a tranquilizer, and I passed out like as soon as I got home. Um, Ended up seeing my doctor within the next my regular doctor within the next week. Um, he tried putting me on a couple different meds, but he started me in therapy. And basically, therapy, honestly, for about the first 3 or 4 times, really sucks. But if you stick with it, it's totally worth it. Um, the number one thing that I would say you need to be aware of is there are forms to fill out, and they can be extremely triggering. I don't have any with me, but off the top of my head, they ask you, have you been abused? Are your parents divorced? Are your parents remarried if they were divorced? Do you self harm? Do you use alcohol? Do you use drugs? If so, what drugs? Um, why do you think you use these drugs or use these coping mechanisms? What medications are you on? What other things should the therapist or counselor be aware of? And honestly, the part that sucked the most was, for me, between the different people I've seen, is explaining all of that, because they always ask you, oh, what was this like? How bad was it? Kind of thing. And they talk to you about the things you wrote on the forums and whatever, and that's kind of honestly the worst part for me. But once you're over that, most of the time, they'll stay just slightly outside your comfort zone. It won't be so uncomfortable. Um, I kind of made a deal with my counselor that he would never say, well, how does that make you feel? Because it always makes me feel like I'm being put under a microscope. You can ask most counselors, psychiatrists, psychotherapists, therapists, whatever, and most of the time they will actually not do that if you ask them not to. Therapy can suck and it can be extremely tiring, but it is definitely worth it in the long run. Okay, for women who or teenage girls who were abused by their father or by some other male subject, I know it can be hard to have a male counselor, but I do have a male counselor and I really like him. My general practitioner is also male, but I actually know him personally rather than professionally. I knew him as a friend of the family before he was actually my doctor, because he's a really cool guy. But a lot of doctors will actually, if you tell them what you need, most of the time, they will go out of their way to make sure that happens for you. You just gotta, sometimes you have to remind them though. As far as psychiatrists go, be aware that a lot of them do not care so much emotionally how you're doing. They don't want to hear the stories or whatever. They'll tell you to talk to your therapist or counselor about that. They can be jerks about it, but they're really, most of them are really, really good with knowing what medications to put you on with a few simple questions. And uh, trust them on the medication thing, but make sure they are listening to what you're telling them about side effects. Some of them will write off side effects, but if you kind of bring them back to the topic a couple of times when they change the subject and go, no, I think we need to do something about this, they will fix it. Um, but sometimes you have to uh, be aware. It depends on psychiatrist though. The number one best thing you can do when entering therapy is whatever diagnosis they give you, read every single piece of literature that appears to be trustworthy on the subject. Educating yourself is the best thing you can do. And there are a lot of resources online. I know if you go on the government's VA website, they have a lot of good information about PTSD. Not all of it pertains to civilians who haven't been in war zones, but most of the information is still good nonetheless. Help sites, depending on what it is, there are message boards out there. I know there's a message board for males who've been sexually assaulted. It's called malesurvivors.org. It's really good because I know a lot of guys can't talk about what they've been through because society just kind of doesn't allow it. Uh, and maybe you don't want to go into therapy, but there are things you can do on your own that can make therapy a lot easier. Um, like I said, reading up on what it is. Even uh, YouTube actually has other great videos. There aren't very many on PTSD other than what it is and a lot of stuff concerning war veterans, but you gotta understand that's what the government draws attention to. It doesn't, our culture also doesn't draw attention to rape victims or things like that. It's just not culturally sound, I guess you would say. Um, our culture's kind of messed up in that we think that it's the victim's fault that they didn't stop the rapist when it's the rapist who is the cause of it. Um, the whole victim blaming thing is messed up, and I'm not going to go off on a rant about that because it will take me a lot more time than I have already spent making this video. I could probably make several videos on victim blaming, and maybe I will. Depends on how much I feel like ranting after this. But back to the topic. So, the things you should assume when you go into a therapist. Assume they know absolutely nothing about you and you have to explain every little detail of their life. They love that, and it's good for you because you realize a lot more about your life than you thought you did. If you're being put on medication, beware that there are a lot of side effects. If you are having issues with it, um, call your doctor. If it's serious, you call your doctor. Most, at least, um, give me a second. Having trouble with words today. Most psychiatrists do, they are on call or they do check their messages even over the weekends, or their secretaries do, and they can get someone to help you, or they will send you to the ER. And if they do tell you to go to the ER, go to the ER. Just just do it. Um, because I actually had a life-threatening reaction to a medication. I think I made a video about that, about a reaction to the meds I was on. Basically, what it was between 2 and 8 weeks of starting the medication is like the highest point where you can have an allergic reaction, and the reaction can actually kill you. Um, it's not, it can go into anaphylactic shock, but basically it's a deadly rash that you can get from being on this medication. It's really rare, but I seem to be the lucky person who has all the worst side effects of things. Don't know why, but and so basically what happened with that was I was doing some yard work. I think I was mowing the lawn or something in August, and I felt a stinging on my back. I realized I had a really bad rash. It was literally half an hour before my psychiatrist got into the office. I called, I left a message. Her assistant called me back within 10 minutes of them opening and asked, "What's the medication? What's your dosage? When did it start happening?" And then she gave that information to the psychiatrist, who um, went, "Okay, if this, try this and try this. If it doesn't get better within 4 hours, because it takes Benadryl 3 to 4 hours to take effect. If it doesn't start working within 4 hours or it gets worse, go to the emergency room," um, kind of thing. Stop taking the medication, kind of thing. But having a psychiatrist for medication is a really good idea, rather than just a general practitioner, because they know specifically what meds are better for things like, for example, Abilify is a bipolar medication, but it's better for bringing manics down to a normal level rather than bringing depressives up. It's but other medications are the opposite, and they're better for bringing the more depressive angle up and the manic down, or vice versa. So yeah, if you guys have any more questions, I might make a second video on this. Um, but yeah, so if you guys have any more questions as far as what to expect from therapy and when you first start going to a therapist, just let me know. So